For centuries, many quests to find and raise treasure have focused on Spanish ships that hauled the wealth of the New World across the Atlantic Ocean. Hurricanes and naval battles sank many of these treasure-laden ships to the ocean floor. Of these, the Spanish galleon San Jose was definitively among the most sought-after of its kind, if not the most sought-after in the Western Hemisphere. Emeralds, silver, gold. These are things no one could say the San Jose lacked in any sense of the word. Its sheer haul of treasure and goods from Spain's imperial holdings across South America make its current existence on the ocean floor an extreme temptation for investors, salvage companies, and even national governments. But exactly how did this absolute trove of a ship end up beneath the waves? Here we'll explore the transatlantic war that sealed its fate, as well as the most recent war being waged for the fate of its cultural legacy and riches. The San Jose was designed by Francisco Antonio Gorote, who then passed on his specifications to Pedro de Arostegui at the Mabel shipyards near the town of Iserbil, also near the town of San Sebastian. In 1696, Gorote would sign a contract with the Spanish crown for the manufacture of two twin ships of 1,200 tons. This would be the San Jose and her sister ship, the San Joaquin. Construction began the following year in 1697, the year of Pedro de Arostegui's death. The ships were finished in 1698 and handed over by Pedro's son, Pedro Francisco de Arostegui, in 1699. They had 2 decks and a castle and ports for 70 guns. However, the ships would ultimately depart for Spain's American colonies with just over 60 of their originally designed armaments, inclusive of 18-pounder, 10-pounder, and 6-pounder guns. The ship's measurements gave them a length of 71 cubits, 106.5 feet, or 32.5 meters. They had a beam of 22 cubits, 33 feet, or 10 meters, and a depth of 10 cubits in the hold, 15 feet, or 4.6 meters. After her delivery in 1699, San Jose made the crossing from the town of Pasajes to the city of Cadiz with its twin sister, San Joaquin. Their purpose was to enlist as part of the fleet of galleons bound for Tierra Firme, the southern portion of the Spanish Main in the Americas. However, the San Jose would soon be caught up in the War of the Spanish Succession, wherein Spain's previous monarch, King Charles II, oh my god! Hold on, me. Look something up here. Oh, okay. That makes sense. King Charles II had passed away in 1700 without a direct heir. His death led to a subsequent power struggle for control of the Spanish Empire amongst supporters of the claimant Bourbon and Habsburg dynasties. Charles's official heir was Philip of Anjou, or Philip V, a grandson of Louis XIV of France, whose main backers were France and most of Spain. His ascension to the throne was challenged by Archduke Charles of Austria. The latter was supported by the Grand Alliance, whose main members included Austria, the Dutch Republic, and Great Britain. The war would delay San Jose's trip to the Americas year after year, causing expenses to skyrocket. The ship's provisions carried in 1701 and subsequent years had to be thrown into the sea, as they had become rotten after so much time spent waiting. Something similar happened with her crew, who had to be discharged and re-embarked on the various occasions when the fleet had orders to set sail. From March to February 1706, with intermittent periods at sea, the ship's crew were kept to a minimum, and mainly for purposes of maintenance and surveillance of the ship itself. Finally, after 7 years, the Tierra Firme galleon fleet set sail from Cadiz on March 10, 1706. It was made up of 10 merchant ships, with the escort of the San Jose serving as the flagship of General Jose Fernandez de Santillan, Count of Casa Alegre. Her accompanying sister, the San Joaquin, was in the charge of Admiral Miguel Agustin de Villanueva, while the Patache, Santa Cruz, a kind of cross between a rig and a schooner, joined them as well. The crossing of the Atlantic was made in conjunction with the New Spain fleet of 13 merchant ships and 3 warships, under the charge of Diego Fernandez de Santillan, the nephew of San Jose's captain. The ships arrived safely in Cartagena de Indias, the modern-day Colombian coastal city of Cartagena, on April 27th. Shortly afterward, the allied Frenchman Jean Ducasse and his squadron arrived to escort the New Spain fleet to the port city of Veracruz. Meanwhile, Casa Alegre's fleet remained in Cartagena de Indias, waiting for the Viceroy of Peru to organize the Portobello Fair, as was always done upon the arrival of the Tierra Firme fleet. Because of smuggling, especially by the French, the merchants of the Viceroyalty were not enthusiastic about the arrival of much more expensive goods. The sale of merchandise for the Spanish crown was very necessary, however, especially to facilitate the return of the fleet with the funds it so desperately needed, apart from the expenses incurred in maintaining the ships and crews. Due to pressure from the embattled King Philip V, the Lima merchants sailed from El Callao on December 19, 1707, to disembark in Panama. All the while, the Casa Alegre fleet sailed from Cartagena de Indias on February 2, 1708, and arrived in Portobello on the 10th to organize the fair, which still did not start right away due to a series of setbacks and disagreements between the merchants and Casa Alegre himself. The fair concluded between April to May 1708. Casa Alegre set sail from Portobello in late May 1708 for Cartagena, where the fleet needed to repair ships such as San Jose, which was at risk of possibly shipwrecking once they left for Havana. The San Jose was loaded with 600 passengers and crew, as well as between 7 and 11 million 8 escudo coins in gold and silver, valued at 105 million reals at the time, between $4 billion and $17 billion today. Much of the gold and silver came from the mines of Potosi, Peru, a labyrinth of tunnels and caverns that provided more than half of the silver in the Spanish Empire. The silver bars and coins stamped with PTSI would have been transported up the Pacific coast to Panama City, then carried on mule trains across the narrow Central American isthmus to the Atlantic port of Portobello. Once there, it would be loaded again on the ships of the mighty treasure fleets sailing for Spain, such as the San Jose. In the Armada of 1708, the value of the cargo on the flagship alone exceeded Spain's annual national income from all sources. When the bullion and coins on all the galleons of the Armada were totaled, it was 2 to 3 times Spain's annual income. In addition, there were trade goods of cocoa, indigo, leather, cochineal, precious woods, and many other items. The riches were destined for King Philip V of Spain, who relied on resources from his colonies to finance his efforts during the War of the Spanish Succession. Based in Jamaica was the squadron of Commodore Charles Wager, who knew of the presence of Casa Alegre's fleet. Since April 6, 1708, his squadron had been patrolling between the Rosario Islands and the San Medina Shoals, waiting to assault Spanish ships and seize their treasure. This squad was made up of vessels such as his own ship, the 74-gun Expedition, the 60-gun Kingston, the 50-gun Portland, and the fireship Vulture. In April 1708, the squadron anchored off the island of Little Baru, today El Rosario Island. A number of factors are believed to have made Casa Alegre set sail on May 28, 1708, for Cartagena, though he already knew the intentions of the English. Hurricane season in the Caribbean was approaching, and he had to hasten his departure to Cartagena and then Havana to return to Spain. From Havana, it was planned that Ducas's French squadron would give them an escort, and it was possible that if the fleet was delayed, the squadron would leave without them. The Spanish fleet was made up of 11 merchant ships, some armed, and an escort reinforced by 2 French frigates that arrived in Portobello from Cartagena. With these forces, and with knowledge of the presence of the British in the area, Casa Alegre was confident that he could defeat them. This was despite the Spanish ships having cannons of smaller caliber and lesser range, as well as being overcrowded with goods and passengers, particularly that of his own ship, the San Jose. San Jose's captain, General Casa Alegre, knowing that the British might have ships waiting to attack him off Cartagena, pushed forward anyway, and by the evening of June 8th, he would find out just how fateful a decision that would prove to be, not only for himself, but for the San Jose as well. On June 7th, the Spanish fleet sighted the San Bernardo Islands and was sailing with a favorable wind. Despite the fact that there was a full moon, the general ordered the fleet to anchor in place due to the danger of running aground on the shallows of Rosario Island. At dawn the next day, June 8th, he resumed the journey, being at noon in sight of the Bay of Cartagena, about 20 leagues or roughly 70 miles away. By then, the English squadron, however, was already in sight. Wager, who was continually informed of the movements of the Spanish squadron, began to move towards them. There was a light rain and a light wind. The latter would then suddenly disappear, making sailing, and thus escaping, almost impossible. At 3 in the afternoon, a gentle breeze arrived that placed each ship in its combat position. The San Jose, the largest galleon in the fleet, was in the center of the formation, while her sister, the San Joaquin, sat at the rear. The first to open fire was the Kingston against the San Joaquin around 5 in the afternoon, breaking her mainmast yard. The San Joaquin had already been trying to escape when the blow was struck, causing her to lose speed. However, she was able to escape successfully with the help of another ship. Wager's own ship, the Expedition, went straight for the San Jose. Wager came within about 300 meters of her when he fired his first volley. The San Jose then responded with fire from her starboard side. With clear intentions to board her, the Expedition shot at San Jose's sails and rudder as she approached, forcing Casa Alegre to order an escape. It is not exactly known what happened next, whether it was a lucky shot from the Expedition, a last-ditch attempt by Casa Alegre to deny the treasure to the English, or any other number of possibilities that could have played out within those last few seconds. Either way, the result was still the same. At 7:30 in the evening, as the Expedition closed to within 60 meters of her quarry, the San Jose's powder magazines suddenly detonated, exploding the galleon into 1,000 pieces, damaging the nearby Expedition and stunning its astonished crew. The San Jose, the 62-cannon galleon bulging with gold, silver, and gems from Spain's colonies across South America, would have its fate sealed in a matter of minutes. Its burning remains speedily sunk down into the Caribbean Sea, the wreck disappearing below the waves about 16 miles off the Colombian coast, just south of the safe refuge of Cartagena's fortified harbor. With her went some 578 passengers and crew, including her captain, Casa Alegre. Only 11 of the 600 who had been aboard her at the time were ultimately saved, 5 of whom were picked up by an English boat. Along with the wreck sank nearly up to $20 billion worth of gold, silver, and jewels, much of which may have been packed in the private chests of the 300 wealthy passengers that had been aboard. The sinking was a disaster for the Spanish crown, who had been eagerly awaiting its first treasure fleet in 6 years. However, this was also a human tragedy, as nearly 600 crew and passengers perished with the ship. For over 3 centuries, the San Jose lay lost on the ocean floor, undiscovered and undisturbed. However, the mystery surrounding the ship's final resting place began to unravel at 3:49 p.m. on December 4, 2015, when the then Colombian president, Juan Manuel Santos, tweeted that the wreck of the ship had officially been found. A week earlier, on November 27, 2015, the San Jose was officially discovered 600 meters down in Colombian waters by a robotic submarine called the RIMA 6000, operated by the US-based Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. The autonomous vehicle was able to descend just 9 meters above the galleon in order to photograph her. Special focus was given to the bronze dolphin-engraved cannons, which were what ultimately helped researchers to identify the wreck as that of the San Jose. What President Santos failed to make mention of in his tweet, however, and probably intentionally so, was that the discovery had been made on the heels of a decades-old controversy. In 1980, the Colombian government authorized the Glaucomora Company, a U.S. salvage company, to explore for shipwrecks in its waters. Recovering sunken cargoes was nothing new. The Spanish even tried it with their own galleons back in the 1700s, but the boom in diving technology, sonar, and commercial submarines in the 1970s made deep-sea recovery more practical, though still a dangerous, expensive, and frequently fruitless endeavor. The GMC spent $10 million of investors' money in archive searches, as well as sending a boat and submarine to search for the San Jose and its cargo worth an estimated $10 billion. The next year, 1981, GMC discovered the wreck of the San Jose in the country's territorial waters on the continental shelf off the Colombian coast at a depth of 300 meters. They formally filed the location with Colombia in 1982, along with the details of, quote, piles of timber and debris consistent with objects. The company immediately started making plans for the salvage, only to suddenly find themselves locked out of Cartagena harbor. Glaucomora and Colombia had agreed that the company would be entitled to receive 35% of the treasure recovered. GMC assigned its rights to Sea Search Armada, an American company based in Bellevue, Washington, and in 1984, Colombia agreed that SSA would be entitled to GMC's 35% share. However, it refused to enter into a written contract with SSA and refused the company permission to conduct full salvage operations at the shipwreck site. The Colombian parliament then passed a law giving the state the right to all of the treasure, leaving SSA with a 5% finder's fee, which was to be taxed at 45%. Officials were scrambling to thwart SSA by creating new laws, then trying to apply them retroactively in order to cut their partner out of the deal. In so doing, they had overturned well-established maritime law at the time. Now, the ship is at the center of a custody dispute, with several parties all staking their claim, including the Colombian government, the Spanish government, Sea Search Armada, and the Caracara people of Bolivia. The long debate about who has rights to the San Jose also pits traditional beliefs and customs about discovery and salvage against contemporary attitudes. Charles Beaker, director of underwater science at Indiana University, thinks claims of ownership by right of discovery are outdated. Quote, "Such sites represent the colonization of the New World, and the wealth should go back to the nations from which it came. They're underwater cultural heritage sites of world importance. I can't see any way that Colombia should be forced to give up the treasure to foreign interests." But James A. Gould, a Washington, D.C. based attorney who has represented the government of Spain in similar legal battles over sunken treasure, noted that international law might lead to a different resolution. Gould said that while he can't predict the outcome of this case, courts interpreting international law have ruled in the past that warships lost at sea, as the San Jose was, remain the property of the nation whose flag they were flying. Such a ship may not be disturbed without the consent of the nation that owned it when it sank. Beaker further said there are, quote, "a lot of opinions out there about who actually owns the riches of the San Jose, but I think Colombian officials are astute enough to handle it correctly." However, David Paul Horan, a Key West attorney specializing in maritime law and personal injury, said he thinks the San Jose dispute eventually will reach a negotiated settlement, but that common sense often disappears when treasure is found on the ocean floor. Horan said he's seen sober, sophisticated business people, quote, "just lose their minds when they get a whiff of treasure." Sea Search Armada would go on to sue Colombia in its own courts in 1989. The Colombia Constitutional Court struck down the law passed by the country's own government as unconstitutional in 1994. Later, the Circuit Court of Barranquilla held that SSA and Colombia each owned 50% of the San Jose treasure. However, the source of the 50% figure remains a bit mysterious, given that the original agreement between the two parties called for a 65-35 split. As it turns out, it doesn't matter how the Colombian Constitutional Court came up with its ruling, as even though it ruled in favor of the 50-50 split in 2007, the government of Colombia chose to ignore it and even threatened any salvage attempts in Colombian waters with naval action. Sea Search Armada subsequently filed 2 lawsuits in U.S. courts, the first in 2011 when the U.S. court ruled the wreck as the property of the Colombian government, and again in 2015, but the case was thrown out on technical grounds. Colombian Cultural Minister Mariana Garcés Córdoba contended that all legal challenges were ruled in favor of the Colombian government, but Jack Harbiston, managing director of SSA, said that Colombia, quote, "keeps repeating the big lie, which is unfortunately repeated by the press, that the GOC won the case in federal district court and SSA had lost its rights to the treasure. Nothing could be further from the truth." Former Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos didn't credit SSA when he announced Colombia had found the galleon in 2015. Instead, he stated that the Colombian-led search team found the wreck nowhere near the SSA's coordinates of 1982, and in deeper water 600 meters down. Colombian Vice President Marta Lucía Ramirez said in a statement that, quote, "Sea Search Armada has no right over the San Jose galleon or its contents because the coordinates where they claim to have found the galleon don't match its actual location." Or so she says. The current problem is that the Colombian government will not reveal the new coordinates, so no one knows how close the wreck actually is to the SSA site. Given the margin of error for less accurate mapping in 1982, before GPS systems became more widely used, it may be impossible to ever find out for sure. Spain is yet another party that does not agree with Colombia on its claim to the ship. At one point, the Spanish foreign minister reminded Colombia that the San Jose was a, quote, "ship of the state with sovereign immunity and classified as an undersea grave." The contemporary Colombian foreign minister is known to have shot back with, quote, "everything found in Colombian territory is Colombian." This position reflects Colombian laws pushed through in recent years that shipwrecks and their cargoes found on the Colombian coast are the property of Colombia, based on the UN's Law of the Sea. This makes sense from the point of view of a country whose coastline is full of foreign wrecks whose original owners might want them back. but UNESCO conventions on underwater cultural heritage, which Colombia has not signed up to, give some weight to the original flag owners, in this case Spain, particularly in the case of warships. Even outside of the UNESCO rules, there are many legal precedents of nations retaining rights to their sunken vessels even in foreign waters. In fact, Spain has successfully won cases against US-based treasure hunting companies which were forced by US courts to return artifacts to Spain. However, Spain's action or inaction on its claim to the San Jose might depend on what future plans Colombia has for the wreck and her cargo. Soon after his 2015 tweet, President Santos declared that, quote, "The wreck is patrimony for all Colombians. To protect it should be the national goal." He went on to announce plans for an international dream team of archaeologists to supervise the excavation, cataloging and preserving the remains, and facilitating the construction of a museum to house the artifacts in Cartagena. Spain has contested that, as the ship belonged to its navy, it should be considered a ship of state and protected under UN law. Additionally, it sees that the majority of the 600 crew and passengers who died when the ship sank were Spanish citizens, whose burial rights should be respected. The UNESCO Convention says the best way to preserve a wreck is to leave it be. Given the history of the San Jose, the fact that it is a gravesite, and the probable conflicts arising from its recovery, this is perhaps one of the less contentious options. Under the sea, it belongs to everyone and no one. Quite understandably, the descendants of the enslaved workforce that Spain used to extract much of the wealth that was then transported aboard the San Jose are also demanding a share of the treasure. The claim of the indigenous people of Bolivia, the Caracara Nation, is that their ancestors were forced to mine the precious metals during the 1500s in Spanish mines. Not only that, but they had done so on their own ancestral lands which, while once part of the Viceroyalty of Peru, were the source of much of San Jose's riches. Thus, they have posited that the bounty belongs to them. The people have expressed their willingness to work with the current Colombian government, however, and have now asked for the return of only a few pieces from the ship. In a statement, a native leader of the Caracara people, Samuel Flores, said that these pieces were wanted, quote, "not only for the symbolic issue but more for the spiritual issue. We just want our ancestors to be at peace." As of June 20th, 2024, during the making of this video, the Colombian government has officially launched its expedition to recover their bounty of the San Jose shipwreck. The first stage of the research project has been described as a, quote, "characterization phase." An underwater robot will be sent to the site of the sunken galleon to take readings around the wreck and to recover some of the treasure. All the while, remote sensors are being used to generate a picture of what archaeological material is on the seabed. The country's culture minister, Juan David Correa, said 7 years after the official discovery of the wreck off Colombia's coast that an underwater robot would be sent to recover some of her bounty, estimated to be worth billions of dollars. The robot would extract items from the outside of the galleon to see, quote, "how they materialize when they come out of the water and to understand what can be done to recover the rest of the treasures." The Colombian government has said no archaeological excavations are planned in the initial stage of the project. The operation will cost more than $4.5 million, and the robot is working at a depth of 600 meters, or 300 if you're in favor of SSA's side of the story, to remove items such as ceramics, pieces of wood, and shells. The expedition to start recovering the shipwreck's trove comes as a case is underway at the United Nations Permanent Court of Arbitration between Colombia and Sea Search Armada, the latter of which is sticking to its story of having found the wreck 40 years ago. The company is demanding $10 billion, which is half of the wreck's current estimated value. The case can still be viewed under case number 2023-37, Sea Search Armada LLC USA v. the Republic of Colombia, on the Permanent Court of Arbitration's website. Despite the obvious wealth that now lies at the San Jose, so much of her later legacy has been clouded beneath an ever-expanding web of international intrigue and lawfare-based saber-rattling. Out of all the claimants to the wreck, in my opinion, it is the Caracara Nation, as well as Spain, that come the closest to seeing through the treasure hunting to the more important matter at hand. That matter, simply and plainly, is that there was a terrible human cost to San Jose's treasures, as well as an even worse loss of human life. Entombed within the wreck, alongside the scattered gold and silver, are the remains of almost 600 people. People like you and I whose lives were cut suddenly and violently short. Even though it may be a wreck from hundreds of years ago, much more removed from our time, that makes the lives lost on June 8, 1708 no less human than those lost in the centuries thereafter. Whether the treasure ultimately goes to Colombia, Spain, Sea Search Armada, or the Caracara Nation, the truth is this. The San Jose is a massive cemetery of gold, wood, and metal. Regardless of its desolation, it should be treated with no less respect than an actual cemetery. Put more simply, and perhaps more poetically, if a gilded cage is still a cage, then a golden grave is still a grave.